Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for a discussion on city water and sewer utilities. I hope everyone had a moment to take a look at the posters and the photos on the back of the room on display. My name is Chantal Limon. I work in community relations for the city of Camarillo, and I will be moderating tonight's public forum. City staff joining us tonight are Director of Public Works, Dave Klotzel, Director of Finance, Mark Uribe, Assistant to the City Manager, Michelle Deanna, Management Assistant, Deborah Gallegos, and Rich Pembroke. I apologize on the last name, Rich, but thank you for being here tonight. Also with us is Kevin Kostick with Raftelis Financial Consultants, who has been working in partnership with city staff and our Utilities Committee on the city's water and sewer financial plan. Also in the audience, joining us as interested community members are Vice Mayor Tony Tremblay and Councilmember David Tennyson. We would like to thank all members of the public for joining us tonight on Zoom as well to learn about the critical needs of our water and sewer systems. We have a brief presentation prepared for you this evening. After the presentation, we will move into a question and answer session. If you have a question for city staff, we ask that you please write it on a comment card. Michelle and Deborah both have comment cards with them if you need one. And for those of us who are joining virtually, please submit your questions via the Zoom chat. During question and answer, for the benefit of all viewers at home, I will read each question aloud to the room. And if you prefer that your question not be read aloud, staff will be available after the presentation to speak with you one-on-one. Lastly, we would like to emphasize tonight that the meeting is not a public hearing. Please know that there will be no actions taken this evening and no decisions will be made. A public hearing on this topic will be held at City Hall on October 11th at 5 o'clock. At this time, I would like to introduce Director of Public Works, Dave Klotzel, who will provide a background on the city's water and sewer needs.
All right, great. Thank you, Chantel, and welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody coming out and joining us also virtually. The flow of tonight's meeting will be to summarize the current needs of the city's water and sewer systems, and then we'll present the proposed adjustments to the water and sewer rates, and then wrap up with addressing any questions you might have. So we'll begin with a brief introduction to the city's water and sewer systems, and also share why rate adjustments are needed to support safe and reliable services. To help us understand what all is involved in the water and sewer system, when we turn on the faucet or flush the toilet, we rarely think of the complex processes and infrastructure that's required to keep these critical services running. Water is sent to homes and businesses through a series of underground pipes. When the water reaches our homes, it's used for many things, including cooking, cleaning, laundry, bathing, some for outdoor irrigation. That inside water then that goes down the drain goes to the city's sewer collection system. From here, the wastewater travels to the water reclamation facility, which treats several million gallons of wastewater every day. Finally, nearly all the treated water is reused for irrigation, with some released into Conejo Creek as necessary. It takes a complex network of infrastructure and a large team of dedicated professionals to keep the city's water and sewer systems running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with ideally no thought given from the public as to those services being provided. So what do water and sewer rates pay for? Funds generated by utility rates provide high-quality drinking water and wastewater services for the city's 45,000 customers. The city serves roughly 2/3 of the Camarillo population, with other water and sewer agencies serving the remainder of the population. So these rates and what we're talking about tonight are for city water and sewer customers only, not the other customers of other water and sewer districts. So the revenue directly supports critical infrastructure, which includes, as listed here, many items: 994 miles of water pipelines, about 144 miles of sewer mains. There's multiple pump stations. We have 4 groundwater wells, 6 water storage reservoirs, and over 2,500 manholes in the sewer collection system. Like our vehicles and homes, Camarillo's water and sewer systems require continuous routine maintenance and upgrades when necessary. Utility rates pay for ongoing operations, maintenance, repairs, debt repayment, emergency reserves, and forward-looking capital improvement projects. Speaking more on those planned improvement projects, the city must continually invest in our water and sewer systems to maintain safe and reliable services. Our current 5-year capital improvement program has identified 33 critical water and sewer projects. The major projects are listed here and include improvements to the city's sewer lines, pump stations, groundwater wells, the water reclamation plant, and more. The largest project in the history of the city involves significant upgrades to the city's water reclamation plant. The reclamation plant treats and disinfects approximately 3.5 million gallons of wastewater every day, producing high-quality reclaimed water that is distributed for agricultural and landscaping irrigation. Over the last 60 years, as shown on the map, the water reclamation plant has undergone several upgrades and expansions to support our growing community and meet evolving regulations and requirements of those regulations. Many components of the treatment process are now nearing the end of their useful life and will require replacement within the next 10 years. The city recently completed a wastewater master plan that identified those needs in a very high-level planning approach and have confirmed the amount of upgrades and improvements that are needed at the water reclamation plant. So those substantial upgrades are going to be needed at the plant to operate effectively, meet future demands, protect the environment, comply with regulations, and withstand climate uncertainty. So with the city's recently completed comprehensive rate study, it was determined that sewer and water rate increases are needed for several reasons, including to replace and repair aging infrastructure, pump and purchase scarce water resources, maintain and upgrade critical infrastructure facilities and treatment facilities, and account for rising costs of materials and energy. So that's a summary of the needs of the water and sewer system. Then that generates the need for adjustment to rates. And I'll be turning it over now to Kevin Kostick with Raftelis Financial Consultants, and he'll summarize how the proposed rate adjustments have been determined.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your participation tonight. Each rate study that we undertake follows a similar trajectory that you see here on the screen. So first, as Dave mentioned, we have master plans that guide the long-term utility needs, the infrastructure needs of our water and wastewater utilities, evaluating risks, seeing where repairs and replacements are required and prioritizing those. Those projects find their way into an adopted capital improvement plan that the city looks at every year and looks out over a 5-year adoption period, but really over a 10-year planning period. The next step is to incorporate those capital improvement projects, or CIP as we refer to them, into our larger financial plan and our schedule of costs. So we have operating costs of the utility, we have debt service for borrowings that we may have undertaken in the past for capital needs, and then we have future capital costs as well. So that financial planning process identifies if our existing revenues from rates from all the user fees that you all pay are sufficient for our future costs, or if adjustments are needed, increases to rate revenues. The next step is cost of service analysis. That's where we take those revenue needs or the rates that we generate from all of our different customer classes and we allocate them. We slice them like a pie, right? We have different user classes in the water system, the wastewater system. We have residential users. We have commercial users that are different than industrial users that are different than people who have irrigation needs. So that's a method of slicing up that pie so that we can be fair and equitable to everybody who uses the system. And the last step is rate design, proposed rates. And that's where we simply take those costs and we say, well, we need to recover X from this class and Y from another. And we have different structures to do so. Rate schedule, or excuse me, rate process schedule. We started this back in October of last year. The city utilizes a utilities committee internally to wade into the weeds of all things on the utilities, getting into the weeds on costs, on water demand, on conservation, on these capital needs. And we work through that committee from October all the way through June of this year, looking again at all of those costs and identifying different ways that we can fund the financial needs of the utilities in the future. In July and August, we met with City Council. That first meeting was to look at different options, different scenarios, if you will, for funding the needs of the utilities over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. August is when we came back to the City Council with a firm proposal documented in a report, and that's when they authorized the notice to all you customers. We're holding community outreach, obviously tonight, but throughout this entire process. City Council will hear this rate proposal in a public hearing on October 11th. And if adopted, if there's no majority protest, and we'll get to that in a slide or two, then new rates would be effective January 1st. That would be a first increase. And then July 1st of next year would be a second increase to all water and wastewater rates. So proposed rate changes on the water side. So this is just the water utility itself. The current bill for a typical single family home in Camarillo is $52.03. That incorporates two pieces of your bill. That's a fixed charge that varies based on the size of your meter. So it doesn't matter how much water you use, it's just varies on the connection size. And then the amount of water that you use. The average in the city is about 12 units of water monthly. A unit of water is a funny term. It's 100 cubic feet. That's 748 gallons. So 12 units a month gets you $52.03 on your bill. With this proposed increase over the next two increases, January 1st and July 1st, that bill would increase to $61.82, an increase of $9.79 per month. So if we look compared to the neighbors, which is always, sometimes it feels good, but sometimes it can be dangerous. It's a little bit lemons and limes because different utility systems are of different ages, they're of different sizes. They may have different sources of revenue outside of rates to fund their needs. But if we look across all of our neighboring agencies, currently Camarillo provides the most affordable service in the neighborhood. Even with those two increases, second most affordable. The other thing to keep in mind is that all these other agencies, communities, they're undertaking their own rate studies. Those are always on different tracks, and so it's a little bit of jockeying. The new proposal this year is a supplemental tool for the city in times of drought or mandatory conservation. These are referred to as drought rates or drought surcharges. A lot of our utilities costs are fixed. It doesn't vary based on the amount of water that's used by a customer. And so when folks reduce their use and conserve, which is what we need to do in times of shortage, there's sometimes an underlying cost that needs to be recovered by the utility. So what you see here is the proposed drought surcharges in the first year. First, we're showing our base rates. And so single family homes have a 3-tier rate structure where the first 9 units are at the lowest rate, $2.23. And then we have a second tier, it's kind of the intermediate tier and price point of $3.31, and then a tier 3 of $4.48. The drought surcharges would vary as well. So an example, a level 1 shortage where we have up to 10% of conservation called for, the use in tier 1 would see a surcharge of 18 cents per unit. And if we look out over the entire schedule, just to say, over the 3 tiers for lower use, intermediate use, high use, and then if we look out over levels of severity, so level 1 being up to 10%, I believe, reduction in water demand, and then up to a fairly severe level 4, and you see the resulting surcharges for every unit of water. So that's something that the city will be evaluating, part of this adoption process for the first time. If we turn to sewer rates, the wastewater utility, if we look at the first 2 years worth or 2 increases, again, January 1 of 2024 and July 1 of 2024, a single family household in Camarillo would see an increase in their bill of $15.07 or roughly 50 cents per day. Again, the current monthly bill is $59.23 for a single family home. That would increase to $74.30. Again, mindful that all these utilities have to have their own rate studies completed, are in different processes and stages in those rate studies. For example, the city of Ventura is in the middle of an adopted 5-year rate schedule. The city of Thousand Oaks looks out 2 years and is adopting a new 2-year rate schedule alongside the city this fall. So let's look at our combined water and sewer rates. The majority of customers in the city are served by both the city's water utility and Camarillo Sanitary District. That increase would be on the order of $24.86 for combined service. So currently $111.26. That increase, again, looking 2 increases out to next July, $136.11. So relative, again, to the neighbors, just ahead of Camarillo and the city of Thousand Oaks, as far as affordability of utility services in Ventura County. Those are all examples based on kind of averages. We'll call them the typical users, the most common users, but the city does have a bill calculator that's on the website. And I urge you to take a look at that, play around based on your own account, your own metered connection, your own water use, and you can calculate your current bill and see what the changes or how those changes would affect you. I mentioned that this process includes a public notice. So here in California, we're unique in the sense that we have to notice every connection on the system as part of a rate study. So once we have a proposal and city council gives its blessing, we notice all of our customers. You will have received that notice. It tells you your right to protest, the rationale for the rates, the underlying rates themselves. And then after a 45-day minimum period, the city council can hear the rate proposal. That is scheduled for October 11th, 2023 at 5 p.m. at City Hall. And with that, I turn it back to Chantel.
Thank you, Kevin. Don't go too far because I'm almost about to open it up for a question and answer. If you have questions, again, just a reminder to please write them on your comment card. Michelle and Deborah, if you could collect those cards for me, I'll be reading the questions aloud. But as Kevin mentioned, information about the proposed rate adjustments is available on our city website. That's cityofcamarillo.org/utility rates. And this information, as the slide shows, has been widely shared through all of the city's communications channels. At this time, we will move into our question and answer session. Again, our question and answer panelists include Director of Public Works, Dave Klotzel, and Director of Finance, Mark Uribe. I'd like Kevin to stay nearby in case we have a question that's appropriate for him. But I'll wait a moment to collect some comment cards and we'll begin with Q&A. For those who are watching on Zoom, please feel free to submit your questions via the Zoom chat. Thank you. Get this microphone turned on. All right. All right, I'll begin with our first question. Mark, I feel like this question might be appropriate for you to answer, but please, whether it's Mark or Dave or Kevin, please just jump in and I'll step to the side for Q&A. So the question reads, a proposed upgrade to water sewer plant was $135 million. Is this still the price? And how specifically will it be financed?
Okay, thank you for the question. Is this working? Okay, there we go. Good question. Yes, at this point in time, the cost estimate is still the current cost estimate. I'll preface by saying pretty much everything we do is a projection or an estimate. When we talk about budgets, it's an estimate given the information we have at that point in time. So with the information we have right now at this point in time, we built into the water and sewer rate studies and we refresh them every year with new information, new updated information to see if anything has changed that we need to factor in and rethink our projections. So as to how it's being funded, it's a combination of different funding sources. One is the sewer reserves. We have substantial reserves in the sewer fund, sewer operation. Part of that is going to be used for funding the system, but we don't have enough to pay the entire amount. And we're talking about a project that is 7 to 8 years out, approximately 7 to 8 years away. We're trying to build for that right now into the rates so that we can build up gradually and have enough in our fund balance to help pay for that project. The other part of it is likely going to have to come from bond proceeds, new debt issuance. So that we've talked through various meetings with the Utilities Committee to find a mix between rates that add to the fund balance that we pay for and reserves pay for the projects, but also for bond issuance and new debt, to find that right mix where we can try and minimize as much as possible the impact to the customers through rates.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question that you touched on. What level of reserves are projected for each utility during the rate period?
If by the level of reserves you mean dollars, I'd have to look back at the study. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. But I would say that the reserve levels are a component of what goes into the rate studies. One component is the operating costs. We want to make sure we're covering the operating costs. One is the capital costs for improvements, capital improvements, infrastructure improvements. Another one is debt service. If we have bonds outstanding, we need to factor in the debt service payments to repay those bonds. And then the fourth category is the reserves. And we have reserve levels that have been set in the rate study and in our policies that are industry standards as far as the reserve levels and the targets. And we build that into our rate study when we look across, as Kevin mentioned, we look across a 10-year period when we go to these rate studies. Even though we are only looking to take action on the first 2 years, we go 10 years out so that we can factor in as many of the different variables as possible. I hope that answers the question. I think what we can do is come back with the actual dollars, or I can look through it in between while we're looking at other questions.
There's a few more finance related questions in my hand, Mark. This question is with respect to the city's, I believe, water and sewer financial plan. How much was the cost to the city to put together the financial plan?
The consultant cost, I believe we were talking about $50,000. Does that sound about accurate? I believe it was around $50,000. And again, we can confirm those numbers, but I believe that was the contract cost for both of the studies together. And we split it 50-50 between the water side and the sewer side when we charge it.
And also just to share with everyone, if we aren't able to answer a question specifically tonight, we will take the question back to City Hall and we will build out a question and answers on our website so that we do get every question answered for you. There's a comment following this question. Given the proposed rates, this would be a total of $250 increase per year, and this will be a hardship to members of our community. Another question related to rates. How often will there be increases, and when was the last one?
The last increase was July of 2022. And to answer the question as far as how often we do rate increases, we review rates every year. And I think we have been adjusting the rates every year. And the reason for that is to try and spread it out and smooth out the rate increases so that we're not looking at a year of no rate increases and then the next year is maybe a doubling effect. So that's the intent behind looking at the rates, looking at the rate studies every year and trying to adjust rates every year. So as we're trying to minimize it every year and the impact and spread it out over a longer period of time.
Thank you. Another question on the proposed rates. This comment card mentions trash, sewer, and water. Can you please break down the costs? I think was that? Can we go back to water and sewer slide? And can one of our panelists confirm whether or not we're talking about trash service?
Thank you. No, we're not talking about trash service. That is a separate contract we have with the trash hauler, and the rates are set separately. This is only the water rates and the sewer rates. And we have some customers that have both services and some customers that have one or the other. And talking about trash, there are some customers that have all three. But again, the focus of tonight and the action that's coming forth in the public hearing on October 11th is only the water and the sewer rates. If you have other further questions on the trash rates and how that works, we can probably answer those separately.
And I'll just briefly add that the slide that you see here is specifically for water service only, not including wastewater. We have some boards in the back as well. So when we're done, you'll be able to see the water only, sewer only, and then combined service examples. If the plant replacement isn't for 7 to 9 years, it is to be done until then.
Okay, I'm doing my best to read this question. If the waste management plant is not to be started until 7 to 9 years from now, what is going to be done until then, and how much reserves are you going to raise?
I think I'll try and answer that to start off, but I think in regards to the reserves, again, the reserve levels would be growing to a point where the money starts to be spent on the project. That's the intent, is to raise the revenues, raise the reserve levels and monies, so that when we get to the point where the project starts, then we can start drawing down on those reserves to pay for the projects. And again, the reserves that have been plugged into the scenario for 10 years are not sufficient enough to pay for the entire cost of the project, that there will be some bond proceeds, bond indebtedness that will be taken on as well to help bridge that gap and become the other funding source. As far as what happens between now and the start of construction, there's a lot of planning that still goes into it. There's design work, there's other planning phases that lead up to that process. And good. It talks about the process between now and then in the construction.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Dave?
No.
Okay. Our next question is not related to rates, but it says, will the improvements to the sewage treatment plant stop the smells in Camarillo Springs?
Yes, excellent question. It's a daily challenge as we treat raw wastewater to manage the odor control. We call it odor control. So as we move forward, which we are in the very early stages of planning and then eventually design, we're going to be looking at all possible and best practices and technology for the entire plant upgrades, including odor control. And we know, I'm confident that there will be improvement to the odor controls that we have today, because our process is going to change. Our entire treatment process will be improved and changed, including odor control. I will also be the person to say we can't guarantee, because we are treating incoming raw wastewater. We can't guarantee that there will never be any smells from our wastewater treatment plant. But with that said, every effort is going to be made as we go forward with design and construction is to improve our odor control as much as possible.
Thank you. At this time, I do not have any more comment cards. Are there any more questions from the audience here? Michelle, looks like we need a couple more comment cards. Deborah, any questions lingering on Zoom? Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, this question again is related to reserves. What are existing reserves, and how much did reserves grow after the last increase in 2022?
Those two questions, I'm gonna have to do some looking. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. I will get something to you before this night is over.
Okay, and we will put this information, these questions and answers on our website. So those will be available after tonight as well. I think we're waiting on another question coming from the audience. 2 more. Okay. 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 Let's see who might be best to take this question. Where does the responsibility start for a homeowner for sewer lines?
I guess I can try to attempt that. I think what's being asked is which part of the sewer system is the city responsible for, and what is the customer responsible for, who's paying the bill, right? So we call it the lateral, the sewer lateral that comes from your house plumbing or a commercial building. That lateral from the interior in the building out to where it connects to the main line in the city, that lateral is 100% the customer's responsibility, even though it extends into the street. So the differentiation is the lateral that takes the sewage from the home or the business is the customer's responsibility. Once it gets into the main line that attaches to, then that becomes the city's responsibility.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Our next question is, will new water meters be issued for new housing? New construction.
Okay, right. I assume that's asking, will additional new water meter connections be approved or added to our water system? And if you've seen around town, there is ongoing construction and some new homes being built, and those will require new meters to our water system. So the number of meter connections is going to increase. Some years back, after the prior drought, 2013, 2014 timeframe, the city has put into place essentially a net zero demand. So any building that occurs within the city has to prove or create offsets to water use somewhere else within the system to basically not add any additional demand to our water system. So that's being accomplished largely by retrofitting indoor plumbing fixtures or retrofitting at the parks, improvements, higher water efficiency irrigation systems to reduce the amount of water use to essentially offset that new demand coming from new meter connections. So essentially, the new meters will be approved and installed, but the measures are in place to not increase the overall water demand citywide.
Yes. Yeah. And I have a follow-up question.
I'll just add to what Dave said here. So not only does new development in your city have to offset their demand, they have to buy into your system. So there's something called a capacity fee or a connection fee. Anytime somebody wants to connect to the system, they have to pay a fee to the city that puts them on par with all you existing users. So they buy into your system. The next thing to say is going back to this idea that so much of our utility costs are fixed in nature. It's infrastructure and pipes and pump stations and things that are out of sight and out of mind, but those costs are generally fixed. So adding connections to the system can actually help share the burden of those underlying costs on the utility system.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question related to new construction outside of the city of Camarillo boundary. So for new construction projects outside of the city of Camarillo, do city of Camarillo water customers help pay for those projects?
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience tonight or from any viewers on Zoom? All right. With that, please know that city staff will remain in attendance tonight for any one-on-one questions that might be lingering. Mark, please go ahead.
I want to try and respond to the reserves question that's come up several times. In the rate studies that are up on the city's website, there are a couple of pages or graphs that talk about the pro forma. The pro forma is basically the financial plan that shows projected revenues, projected expenditures over a course of 5 years. And in looking at that, the projected balance, this is as of June 30 of 2023, the fiscal year that just ended. Again, these were estimates of about $19 million in the water fund, in the water utility, and $37 million in the sewer utility. When we're looking at the pro forma, if we're looking at the water side, and then the other, one of the follow-up questions was how much additional reserves was generated by the last rate increase. I would have to pull up last year's or the previous rate study, but looking at this current rate study that's up on the website, the anticipated amount of revenue being added from the rate adjustments is about $676,000. So out of the 19 million, add another 676,000 to that, to the reserves. But then when we've got expenditures, projected expenditures of 19 million, capital projects of another 5 million, that's bringing down the reserves. Actually, the reserves are expected to go up, but again, that's in the next year, fiscal year 23-24 that we're in. But then as you get into the year 2 of not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year, when the capital projects are planned, then you start seeing the spending down of those reserves to get to, I'm looking at the reserve line, going from 19 million as of June 30, 2023, up to 27 million of 2024, and then back down to 8 million in 2025. That's partly due to those capital projects that are being expended. But I hope that helps with the question of reserves. We got a level of reserve that we target to maintain, but then we also build up through rates in anticipation of the capital projects so that we can pay for those projects as much as we can out of reserves without having to issue bonds. But we also try and mix the bond issuances to minimize the amount of rate increases.
Thank you for that, Mark. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening here in person at the Camarillo Library, and also those who are able to join us on Zoom. Please leave your comment cards with us if you're still holding on to them. We will add them to the FAQs on our city website. And at this time, the Zoom live stream will now end. Thank you and have a good evening.
We're going to put there.